Distinguished participants, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it's a distinct privilege for me to once again participate in this conference, which has now become a well-established institution in the adaptation world. On behalf of Christiana Figueres, the UNFCCC Executive Secretary, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the government and people of Bangladesh for once again hosting this conference, as well as to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to address this opening session. The fifth CBA conference derives a particular significance in its being the first meeting dedicated to adaptation since the adoption of the Cancun Adaptation Framework last December. Therefore, it is the first time that we are deliberating on the subject of adaptation against the backdrop of the Cancun outcomes. These outcomes represent a significant step forward in advancing cooperative international action on adaptation. The fact that we all gather here in Bangladesh adds to the significance of this meeting. Bangladesh is the most populous, least developed country, and it's also one of the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. On the other hand, it is also a forerunner in responding to these impacts, particularly at the community level. Furthermore, in the context of the UNFCCC negotiations, Bangladesh often gives a voice to the least developed countries, highlighting the disproportionate burden that the most vulnerable must bear as a result of anthropogenic climate change. This series of international conferences on community-based adaptation has not only become an important institution in the field of adaptation, but also a forum for learning, whereby valuable lessons and traditional knowledge can be shared upwards, scaled up, as is the motto for this conference. The outcomes of these conferences have assisted in raising awareness on community-based adaptation. They have helped increase the knowledge base, and they have created valuable networks of adaptation practitioners and experts. And I think this is bound to be further enhanced in this conference. As a result of our Cancun outcomes, we are currently embarking on a new phase in the climate change process. The year 2011 is a design year for a number of institutions and processes relating to adaptation that are being born. One of these is the Adaptation Committee, which will boost cooperation to help developing countries in particular. Another is the two-year work program on loss and damage, which addresses the losses arising from extreme weather events as well as slow onset events. This will especially be important for those countries that are particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts like floods and drought. The third is that of adaptation plans, national adaptation plans, which build upon the NAPAs and which aim to identify medium and long-term adaptation needs. And all these will be supplemented by the launch of the technology mechanism and the transitional committee of the new Green Climate Fund. So as you can see, we're embarking on creating a significantly scaled up regime for adaptation. And in this regard, I would be remiss if I did not highlight the significant role played by His Excellency, the Minister of State for Environment and Forests, Dr. Hassan Mahmoud, and his able leadership in helping reach a successful outcome in Cancun in the area of climate change finance. It is important to note that the implementation of the Cancun Adaptation Framework will follow a country-driven, gender-sensitive, participatory, and fully transparent approach. These are the principles. And it takes into consideration vulnerable groups, communities, and ecosystems. It will also be based on and guided by the best available science, and importantly, as well as traditional and indigenous knowledge. The need to preserve and transmit knowledge that has been generated through hundreds of years of coping to areas dealing with new risks cannot be emphasized enough. Communities in Bangladesh, for instance, accumulated a wealth of knowledge in dealing with floods. This knowledge can be applied to adaptation strategies within Bangladesh as floods become more severe and frequent, but also in other countries, which are starting to experience more frequent and intense floods due to climate change. Stakeholder engagement is also an important element of the Cancun framework. And conferences like this and networks like the Global Initiative on Community-Based Adaptation are an essential part of this stakeholder engagement effort. I think that one of the overriding lessons that participants took away from the first CBA conference in 2005, which I also had the pleasure of attending, was that there is ample opportunity to replicate successful practices and that knowledge, communication, and multi-stakeholder collaboration are the first step towards replication and scaling up of these practices. This year, the parties to the UNFCCC will be working hard to develop the details and modalities of the Cancun Adaptation Framework and its institutional arrangements. As always, the engagement of civil society in this work is invaluable and ensures the decisions by parties are well informed. And I know that the outcomes of this conference will be invaluable in this regard. Before concluding, I would like to pay a special tribute to Dr. Salim Ul-Haq, Senior Fellow at IIED, Dr. Atiq Rahman, Executive Director of the Bangladesh Center for Advanced Studies, for their continued global leadership in the field of adaptation at large and their pioneering initiatives on community-based adaptation in particular. Finally, let me not delay the conference any longer. I wish you all a successful and fruitful conference, and I thank you very much for your kind attention.